I am not going to say my typical spiel of it's been a while, because really I can name you a list of excuses on why I have not made videos, any album reviews this year really, but honestly it's a lot of work, and my laptop shit the bed, so I recently had to go get a new one, which kind of made my bank account very angry at me. We had a little fight. I think we're doing better now though. I think we're getting along better. But this is like one of my favorite videos to make, always towards the end of the year. My top 10 albums list of 2019, clearly. Number 10 on my list is probably a surprising one for people. This record is kind of a mess. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a mess. I have a love-hate relationship with this record, and that part of me is like, why are you putting this record on the list if you feel this way about it and that it's messy? And he kind of tried to branch out a little bit, I think, from the typical like pop singer rap artist. Sonically, this record is definitely all over the place. I am not going to lie with that. He pulls out songs from different genres kind of all over this record, and there really isn't a smooth transition, which is why it's at the lowest part of my list. But let me tell you, the songs within this album are amazing. I think they're absolute like bangers. On this record, he definitely shows his versatility here more than his previous records. Sometimes they feel like more of the same, whereas he really does not show it here. He takes styles of rock, R&B, straight up like rap, like trap. He's got some ballads on here, some like alternative style stuff. It's just kind of all over the place. But these songs definitely shine. Post Malone really does show that he can do several different genres, and I think in a way, lyrically, these songs do connect together with the title of the record, Hollywood's Bleeding, especially with the title track starting it off. Kind of portrays the highs and lows of being in the spotlight, you know, whether it's about getting with girls, you know, losing friends, you know, buying all these mansions and cars and whatever really doesn't satisfy, you know, the void in your heart. Like, you know, fake friends, fake fans. And I definitely think that record shows a theme of that. It definitely reaches to different audiences. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne on a track, what is life? And I always kept coming back to these songs, listening to them in the summertime, just like cranking up the stereo in the car and really just like bopping to these. My personal favorites on here are Enemies, Take What You Want, and Allergic. Number 9 for me originally was not going to be on this list, and then I kind of just, it totally like turned me on. And this is Nothing Happens by Wallows. I was kind of late to the party listening to this record. There's a few songs I was familiar with, like Scrawny and Are You Bored Yet? So I was like, why not just listen to the full album? And I gotta say, I was amazed. This is probably one of the most cohesive records in 2019 that I've listened to. Every song intertwines with the next in a way, and I love when a record does that because it feels more like a record, like one collective piece. And especially if you listen to this on vinyl too, it probably sounds great. I don't personally own it, but that will change. I think also what shines on this record is the two different vocalists. Dylan, who I know is in 13 Reasons Why, and I forget the other singer's name. But Dylan has more of that deeper, lower pitched voice, whereas the other vocalist has more of a higher range. And it's kind of funny too, the other singer almost reminds me of Ryan Ross, who was in Panic at the Disco. And even in a way too, like John Lennon or Paul McCartney from the Beatles. The production on this album is super consistent as well, which really helps with the flow of the record. The synths on here really lift up a lot of these songs, and especially like the driving guitars. A lot of the time the guitars create a dreamy mood, but they can also be bombastic. There's parts of these songs where you hear the drums really crashing in, and it's almost like they're just having like this crazy jam sesh. and they're more prominent towards the end of certain songs. But I really like when Wallow shows that heavy side and then they show that dreamy side. And I think this record overall puts together a picture lyrically of just a young adult like in their 20s trying to figure out life, ups and downs of relationships and friendships, and just trying to figure your life out in your 20s. And I think that's why this record hit home for me too, lyrically very well. My favorites on here are Treacherous Doctor, What You Like, and I'm Full. Number 8 for me is UFOF by Big Thief. I mentioned another Big Thief record in my honorable mentions, and funny, Big Thief came out with 2 records this year, and I really applaud the band for doing that because neither record sounds rushed at all. Some of the songs on here as well as the other record are just older songs that they finally kind of composed more polished versions of. Sonically are very different, but this specific one that I'm talking about really relates with the lyrics, the sonical element with the lyrical element. There's mystery on this record and magic, and that's what they focus on in the lyrics too, kind of questioning the unknown, space really, and just anything that's, you know, unusual if there's outside life up there. Ghosts, spirits, I really like how they touch that on that. The vocalist Adrienne, she has a very mysterious way about her. In some of these songs she's like whispering and she's very like subtle and almost sounds like she's keeping a secret in a way, like this is kind of like her own secret. And then other things she kind of wants to, you know, stand out more. And I think that shows musically as well in this record too. There's a lot of softer parts, atmospheric elements, and then there's some parts that really are heavy and rocky and totally unexpected from Big Thief. And I gotta give them credit again for the guitar sounds on this record because they've always been a band that kind of messes around with their guitars and their pedals and stuff. And the buzzy, noisy guitars sound like a rocket erupting into outer space. My favorite tracks are Open Desert, Cattails, and Contact. Number 7 for me is Altogether by Turnover. I was not too pleased with their last record, Pure Nature, and I was a little skeptical on this record as well after hearing the 2 singles, Plant Sugar and Much After Feeling. Much After Feeling kind of felt more of the same of Turnover, if I'm being honest, but I will say this album has a lot to offer once you dive into it. This time around they definitely still keep that dreamy alt style, but also having a few tricks up their sleeve. They try to jazz things up on this record. You see saxophone kind of creep into some of these songs, and I gotta say, like, they totally don't feel like a shot in the dark in a bad way. They really do give this album a more jazzier mood. And it doesn't even have to be the saxophones either. It's overall calm, relaxing, mellow element of this record, which Turnover is obviously known for, you know, in the past 2 records really, but I think it shows more on Altogether. I will say too, the lead vocalist definitely brings some more range on this record. He kind of hits some more higher falsettos and kind of goes into more of this R&B vibe on some of these songs. Also, I have to applaud the bass grooves on this record. They really sound amazing, which also brings more of that jazz element. A lot of the bass lines on here really stand out, amplify that calm, relaxing, mellow mood. I also love the use of various percussion instruments on this record. This is something I don't feel like they've done ever before. You hear like bongos and shakers and all kinds of different things that you don't normally hear from the drummer, at least on a Turnover record, and I have to applaud that too. My favorite tracks on this album are Sending Me Right Back, No Reply, and Ceramic Sky. Number 6 on my list was a very anticipated record, and this is Screaming Through the Walls by As Cities Burn. That band's always meant a lot for me. They kind of were popular in the hardcore scene of music in like the mid 2000s, and then they kind of just fell off the face of the earth like after the last record before this. They really didn't make anything for I think almost 10 years if I'm being honest. And so this was a highly anticipated release for me, and I gotta say, As Cities Burns have really showed their growth and maturity as a band In a way, it almost sounds like they took influence off of The Devil Wears Prada with their record Transit Blues that came out like a few years ago. Definitely hear some spoken word kind of gang vocals with the gutty screams, but more alternative style, intricate guitar work instead of just being flat out heavy and in your face. When the screams are present on this album, they really add to the feeling and the strife of lyrically of what they're talking about, which I think a lot of this record just touches on the world today and how it's kind of falling apart, and everybody's trying to one-up the other person and be better than them, when really everybody's just the same. They go through similar things, make the same mistakes. As Cities Burn really put a lot of feeling into this record and emotion and passion. You can, like I said, you can definitely tell by the vocals and the screams here. My favorite tracks are Maybe, Die Contrary, and Hollowed Out. Number 5 on my list is a different one, and this is When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go by Billie Eilish, who has been very hyped this year. This has definitely been her year, and then I think this record really just brought her up to all of these artists that have been kind of veterans. Truly, rightfully so, I think she deserves the love that she's getting. Combination of soothing but haunting vocals with immaculate production and beats really is fresh and orgasmic for the listener, including myself. I've heard things on this record that I've never heard before within pop music, and I hate to even call this pop music, but I guess she's more in that field. It all sounds different but still flows together by how strong the production is. The production element with her brother Phineas really helps put this record together. I think without him it really wouldn't stand out as much, but you still have Billie Eilish's really incredible vocal talent where she can be really dark and moody, very soothing. I'm not really big into vocal manipulations and vocal pitches, but on this record they really do shine when necessary. A lot of this record touches on very dark and eerie and then very bright and mellow, and it's the perfect combination of the both. And Billie Eilish, you know, has a way of talking about things that really somebody her age doesn't talk about, and I really applaud her too. Perspective on things is so interesting and fresh. My favorite songs are Zanny, Bury a Friend, and 8. Number 4 on my list is The Act by The Devil Wears Prada. Devil Wears Prada has always been a band, like just the prime example, that always tries to change their sound but still keeping themselves within. And you've heard them go from like this hardcore sound to metal into almost like alternative like hardcore. They do a good job, I think, as of lately, kind of blending more genres. The Act does a great job of balancing the heavy tones with atmosphere. They build a lot of these songs up to have these amazing crescendos, a lot of dynamic in this record. And I think they showed that too on their last record, Transit Blues. They pull really heavy elements and then really soft elements just all together. It balances that heavy Devil Wears Prada sound from like Dead Throne and the Zombie EP to more of this unique sound, almost poetic tone with ambience and atmosphere. Mike's screams are heavier when needed, and then he also uses spoken word in a way, I think, to focus more on certain lyrics of the songs. I also think Jeremy, who's the clean vocalist of this band, has really improved his vocals overall. They sound more real and raw, and he still goes really strong on the softer moments too when needed. My favorites on this record are The Thread, Diamond Lost, and Switchblade. Number 3 for me is The Nothing by Korn. Korn has always been a unique band in the metal hard rock scene, and I think the last couple albums they were coming out with were good, but they weren't like a huge wow factor. And I think because Jonathan Davis put so much into this record lyrically, that's what makes it special to me. He writes about his mother and his wife passing away. His wife specifically from drug addiction. I don't know what specifically, but just mourning over that. This album really is just a big mourning for his loved ones, and I can't imagine how hard that must be. And he really shows his frustration, his anger, and his sadness on this record. And the more personal he gets, the more feeling you really get from Korn. If you look at more of the earlier stuff too, where he's touched on, you know, his childhood, he really does put the feeling in there, and it can be an emotional listen. Definitely bring back sonically the heaviness from their early 90s records here. The bass is really strong, it's very prominent like usual. I love the use of different cymbals on this record from the drummer, and the eerie guitars that Monkey and Brian Head give. And Brian Head, you know, back in the band, he really is kind of bringing back that old style of Korn because he has such a signature sound. Like I said before, this album can definitely be a lot to take in and hard to swallow at times if you're really looking at the lyrics, but I think for me that's what makes this record so special, is Jonathan Davis being as real as he possibly can, but also having that really strong musical element to back up. I feel like Korn is back. My favorite tracks on here are Surrender to Failure, The Darkness is Revealing, and The Ringmaster. Now these last two I did have very hard time kind of picking between, but here we go at number 2. Heard It in a Past Life by Maggie Rogers. Another new artist that kind of broke out this year with her debut record, you know, similar to Billie Eilish's story, I guess, but she's not as hyped as Billie Eilish. Maggie Rogers really brings, you know, some life into the pop music scene. I found out about Maggie through her SNL performance when she sang Light On. I heard someone with like a really down-to-earth, natural voice, and really a down-to-earth stage presence as well. I was completely hooked on this record. It has its really dancey elements, but then also its self-reflective elements as well. I think this is like a very personal record for Maggie Rogers, talking about her life. It's hard to let go of the people around you. It's like, should you stay, should you go? She kind of touches on that a lot. People changing, herself even changing. Her vocals on this record can get so bright, and they have this element of R&B, and she also kind of, you know, has this presence the way Florence Welch does from Florence and the Machine, and even like almost like a Stevie Nicks vibe. Like I said, like this very, you know, down-to-earth, naturalistic voice. There's definitely funky grooves on this record, R&B, and then a little piano ballad thrown in there. But if you put it all together, I think it makes an enjoyable listen. I feel like I can listen to this record anytime, and it just really connects with me. I just feel like you don't get enough personality on pop records, and this is one that definitely proves that statement wrong. My favorite tracks here are The Knife, Falling Water, and Overnight. Now, are you ready for number 1? Number 1 for me is the self-titled record by Better Oblivion Community Center. If you guys aren't familiar with this, unless you're kind of more into that, like, I guess, emo scene of music, it's the amazing duo of Connor Oberst, who was from Bright Eyes, that also has a solo project, and then the solo artist, but also with that super group, Boy Genius, it's Phoebe Bridgers. And I really applaud her last record that she came out, Stranger in the Alps. And Connor, you know, has been making his own things and producing his own things as well off of his solo stuff, which can be kind of hit or miss for me. But the two of these guys together really shine. I think it's the perfect blend of harmony with Phoebe Bridgers' more softer vocal range, but again, she can really belt it out as well. And then with Connor's more raw, dark, moody vocals. In my personal opinion too, I feel like this album has a lot of almost kind of like 80s influence to it. It kind of gives me like vibes of The Cars in a way, by how like the guitars are very like spacey and open. Blend that with like a folky rock feel. It takes you on a journey, kind of poking fun at depression, but also admitting how sad life can really be. There's a huge chemistry on this record between Connor Oberst and Phoebe Bridgers, just musically. They're really good friends, and they worked on one of her songs together on her last record. And I think just them having such a good connection and a good friendship shows on the music that they write here. I enjoy the kind of various styles that they're portraying on this record, where they have more of a outer space synthy song like Exception to the Rule, or even like a slow burn like Chesapeake. The guitar work on this record I think is a huge component with this record, just creating more of that sonic vibe, adding to the buzzy, distorted guitars, somberness to like a jam band style. They do a great job of trading places on solo verses, but prominently on this record they really are singing together and make this a really collaborative project. A lot of these songs kind of felt relatable to me. As I get older, I'm a little bit more self-deprecating, and that's kind of how some of this record is, but some of this record also too is just truly sad, and I guess you have to have the sad, right? If you have Phoebe Bridgers and Conor Oberst on record. My favorite tracks on here are Chesapeake, Didn't Know What I Was In For, and Forest Lawn. Well, that was it, guys. That was my top 10 albums of 2019. I really wish I could have talked more about these songs. Like, when I was doing this list, I was like, oh, I wish I could have reviewed these albums, like went back in time and reviewed these records like in separate videos, but it is what it is. This list was probably the hardest list in the years that I've done this to compile, and I think it's just because almost it felt like everything was equally so good and I appreciated all of it that it was hard to pick favorite tracks, and it was hard to piece together a top 10. It's like I knew what was going to be in the top 10, but the order I still was kind of unsure about till the last minute. 2020 I will really be trying to put more content out there. Subscribe to my channel if you're new. Comment down below what your top albums were of the year, if we had maybe any compatible ones. As usual, guys, stay brutal, stay tuned for more videos, and see you guys later.